In this lesson, we're going to have a look at local adjustments, how you can make the extra 10% and make your images stand out. This is a very good way to get a signature style of the particular images that you like to create through post-production. So right now we're going to get back into the software and look at how we can make local adjustments into our image. So looking at this overall image here, we can go through and make these global adjustments like we did from last lesson. So we can go through here and go daylight, cloudy, and go through all these like we did on the last lesson. So let's just make these quick adjustments right now to find out what we particularly like in this image. So still going down a little bit for me on there. So let's just leave it at that. But right now you can see up the top here, it's a very moody day, and I want to try and get that feel back to the image. So that mood created, we've got scale, which we learn about for the human standing there, giving the massive mountains in the background. And we've also got created for mood, so giving us another element inside of our landscape. But I really want to try and emphasize that mood, this feeling. So I spoke before about these local adjustments up here. So the first one on the left-hand side is a crop overlay. So we can go through here and just look at crop overlay. If you want to export an image, Instagram is 4x5, 5x7 might fit a frame size that we're after. This is a particular way you can go through and look at that. On the right-hand side here, you're going to see presets made. So you can go through and do a 1x1, and basically it's got it all inbuilt here. You can go through and enter a custom one if you do have a custom one, which we might look at a little bit later for panoramics, especially if you need to try and print to fit a frame. Also, we can go through, let's just go as shot here. You can go through and create an angle. Now, once we hold down this angle, you're going to see a grid appear. This is really good to line up if we have obviously a horizon line, whether it's say a sunset or a seascape image. We can go through and make sure that is level with the horizon. This is super important because for me, looking at a photographer's image, this is one of the first things I look for. Dust spots, and is the image straight? And now look into the image. So please make sure your image is always straight. In Lightroom and other software, you can click this straighten tool, and we can just click and hold, and you can make a straight line depending on where it is. You're going to see when I let this go, it's going to move the image to basically how it was, okay? We can click auto, but once again, we haven't got a reference point as far as a horizontal line or anything like that for the software to make it up for us. So we can get away with quite a bit here. This one just here is called spot removal. I'm just going to go closer to the image to see if I've got a spot in the image, a dust spot sensor, to see if we can try and get rid of one. And if not, let's just make one up quickly. So we can just say this area just here, it's a bit of cloud, but we can just go onto this spot removal here. And you're going to see the size. So the overall size of the spot remover, the feather. Now if I go to the left-hand side, you can see it's got no outer ring now. So an outer ring, so the inner ring is 100%. The outer ring is 0%. So once I go, I'm just going to click here and just going to quickly go to this one just to show everyone what I'm talking about. So if I just click here, I'm going to click show selected mask overlay. You can see how it feathers out. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is let's just make this a little bit bigger so it's a bit easier to see. Inside is 100%, outside is 0. So once I click just once, you can see inside is 100%, and then it feathers just out. So in between those two circles is 50%, okay? So that's very important to understand. If we go back down to feather of 0 and just click up here, you can see a very hard edge. We don't want that. We want a feather is always best because we don't want to make big obvious adjustments into our images. So we want to always make sure whether it's spot removal, the graduated filter, it's always set to a big feather, okay? So feather 100%. The lowest I normally go is around 65 to 70. So we can just basically, what we're trying to do here is try and get, so if this was the spot, I can just get my scroll wheel on the mouse and it's going to change the size also. I want to get the inner circle as close as possible to that spot. So what I'm going to do just quickly is make a really horrible spot, a really small spot, so we can just try and get rid of this so it's a bit easier to see. So we're going to go size, we're just going to put this black spot here, okay? So this is a dust spot on our sensor, but we've just made it ourselves. So I want to try and make this as small as I possibly can. So let's go around there and see how it's just a little bit over. I can click and hold, and you see how it's going to get rid of that. It's going to take it to another area on site, but we can't obviously replace this because it's a brush. The only reason why it won't do that, I have to get rid of that brush there. See at the top here, it's gathered this information here and taken it over here. So I can get onto, let's say, this tip of this mountain here. I can click and hold and make it a little bit bigger, and you're going to see it's taken it from this area up here and replaced it with this down here. Now if you don't like this area, you can click and hold and drag it. Okay, so I can drag it to another area and I can make it whatever I want it to be. Okay, so where if I want another mountain peak there, I can make it another mountain peak. So done, and you can't even tell. Okay, so spot removal. Next one is red eye correction. There is no human eyes in here, so we don't have to worry about that. It's more for portrait photography. The next one is a graduated filter. This is a very powerful feature. This and also the adjustment brush, which we will be using a lot inside this course. Now I've got a preset made to -4 just to show everyone. What we're going to do is click and hold. We're going to drag it down and see how right now when I move my mouse, it's very free transformation. If I hold shift, it's going to lock it down to 90 degree movement, sorry. So 90 degrees now, and it's not going to give me that free movement. So the reason I want this for is landscape photography. Obviously, we want to try and make it as natural as possible. So the sky goes into the mountain. Once again, the top one, so where my cursor is down the bottom, this is 0%. The middle is 50%. The top is 100%. So if I make this really small, you can see that the graduated filter isn't as large. But if I make it really long, it slowly dissipates from the top line to the bottom line, okay? So that's very, very important. Once I let it go, it's not done forever. I can just click this and now move it around to wherever I want. Once again, I can get the top one, make it bigger, so it's never fully done. Go outside, I can just move this around as much as possible. So we can go through now, and we've basically got our global adjustments back, but it's only affecting that area, which is really, really cool. So I can get my blacks and see it's only affecting this top area now. It's not affecting everything else, which is really, really cool. So this feature we will play a lot with going down later in when we take a single image and we've got bright highlights and also dark shadows, a really cool feature. This one here is a radial filter, very similar, but I'll be honest with you, I don't use this very often. So the way this works is basically click and hold again, and it's going to make whatever shape you want. Now you can see the inside's working. We can just scroll down and we want to click here, invert. And once again, we can let's just make this jacket, let's do that. Let's make this jacket brighter than it should be, okay? So we're just going to move it onto the jacket. We're going to reset that value once again. And we could almost make this, a different color. So I'm just going to go up to 200%. Whoop. Delete that one. Hold down spacebar and move around. And you can see I can just make this whatever color I want now. So we can just make it there once again, and it is just affecting the jacket. Okay, you can see way too much, but it's just to show everyone what it is doing. Once again, this feather, we want to make sure to feather it all the way out. Because if I don't feather it, you can see it's making a very horrible sharp line. Feather it, and it's so much better. Okay, let's just make this a little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do is chuck it on the jacket. Right now, just move this down just a fraction. Let's just remove this exposure just a little bit. And when we go out, you can hardly even tell that it's done on the image. But once I go back, and I can go down the bottom and toggle this off and on, and look at the difference it's made. So that's another one, but I don't use it very often. The one I do use is this adjustment brush. It's very natural. It's almost like a painting. Okay, so I can just go through. We want to go down once again and make sure our feather is set to 100%. and our size can be adjusted. And if I just paint this in, it is very, very natural into the image. But once again, we have to remember we've got all these global adjustments we can do. We're going to go through all this when we edit a single image. So we want to make sure if the sky needed done, we use a graduated filter. But if we just wanted to do what we call dodge and burning, which is the second most powerful tool in post-production, we can just go through and just paint this in as much as we want, and we can still make changes to this. So you can see I've still got those changes before, so we can just delete this one, and now we've only got changes where we make them to. Okay, so really cool. So this is a very powerful feature, local adjustments inside of editing. Once we get onto editing a whole image, you're going to see we're going to do global adjustments, we're going to do very minute local adjustments, go back to global adjustments, and make smaller global adjustments. This is very simple in post-production once you get the hang of it. It's all trial and error. That is why I want to send you all my images so you can play around with them, because there's nothing worse than getting out in the field, capturing a perfect image, getting home into post-production, and not knowing what to do with it. So muck around with these images right now. We've gone all the way through the course, understanding what to do in camera, now editing them. So once you go out in the field and capture your own images, you'll know exactly what to do from start to finish. But now let's look at one key feature we spoke about throughout this course, exposing to the right. I want to quickly show you why we expose to the right for when we get into post. In this lesson, I want to explain to you what I spoke about so heavily inside of this course. Dynamic range, exposing to the right, and reading a histogram. I emphasize this so much throughout the entire course. I want to show you right now in post-production why I wanted to emphasize this and why you have to understand this for your particular camera. Because when you get into post-production and understand what is going on, when you go out in the field next, you're going to know what exactly to do to get all the information you require to bring home and get the best possible result you can. So I'm into the editing software right now. Let's go into the folder of exposed to the right, and you're going to see these two images right here. They are exactly the same, but what is different? 160 ISO 11.5mm f8. This does not change because these are perfect 160 perfect ISO, f8 perfect for our depth of field, but our histogram. Okay, histogram and dynamic range. This is automatic by the camera. If I left the camera up to doing everything automatically, you would get a readout just like this. And there's nothing wrong with this readout. But when I jump over to the next image, you're going to see the image is blown out a little bit. But look at the histogram on the right hand side. So we want to bring this into the develop module right now, and I highly recommend to go out and do exactly the same for your camera. What we need to do here and understand is you can take this image at your house just looking through a window. Obviously the window is the cave entrance, and inside the cave would be inside your house. What I want to do right now is drag down the highlights and increase the shadows. This might look stupid, I understand that completely, but what I'm getting at here is how much information we can get back from our camera. I'm going to go back to the exposed to the right image and do exactly the same. And you're going to see here the most important thing that we want to look at right now is the highlights, because I told you 100 times in this course that we can get more information back from the shadows than we can in the highlights, and this is proving it. So if I go to 100%, I'm going to go to reset and reset on the secondary image. So you're going to see here, exposed to the right hand side, it is blown out. And the reason I know it's blown out is because it's peaking on the right hand side here, and also it tells me this through the software. So when I drag down those highlights, I'm never going to get that information back. You can see I've got the information back, but if we look at it, it looks absolutely horrible. Okay, so that's basically image destroyed. But if we go back to the image that's exposed to the right hand side, but protecting the highlights. So remember that every time you go out, I want to hear that inside of your head when capturing image. Exposed to the right hand side, but protect the highlights. Protect it like it's your own life. Because if we look at this image right now, we've got a little bit of blown out highlights. But when we reduce those highlights, we're getting so much more information back. And this is what is important. Okay? Then when we get the shadows, we bump it right up and look at all that information we've got. I understand when we increase the shadows, we're also increasing the noise in the image. But it's not so bad. We shot this at 160 ISO. So when I go back to the image that's basically ruined, we can go back here and look. If I increase the shadows, we can get a lot more out of this. A lot more information. What I'm going to do is jump to this reference view, and we're going to put that on there. I'm going to have a look at these two images side by side. And you can see right now, the right hand side looks overall better. That's just because the shadows are not as obviously shadowy, it's not as dark. But on the left hand side, it looks more natural. It looks how it should in real life. And that is what is most important. So if we just jump back to this single image right now and we decrease the highlights where we want them to be, so around that 30 mark, and let's just go to the shadows around, it has to be quite a lot around that 90 mark. Look at that. That is one single image, and this is testing out the dynamic range of your camera. Because I said to you, dynamic range is the highlights versus the shadows and how much information you can get back. But we realize we can get more information back from the highlights, and this is proving it. So please head out and capture an image basically exactly like this. Out the window, it doesn't matter, and just see how much information you can get back. So I captured an image on 0 EV, +1 EV, and -1 EV, which we're going to touch on later inside of this course, how to blend multiple exposures together, which is the perfect way to do this. But sometimes we don't capture enough information, so we need to go out and understand how much information we can get back, say in night photography, how much information we can get back from the shadows of the image. So this is almost the most important thing to understand about your camera. How much dynamic range you can get, and also how much ISO can you go to before you introduce too much noise. So just remember, I want to recap. We're going to have a quick look at these histograms again to reset. So this is basically exposing to the right hand side a little bit gone too far. Okay, so we've lost that information. We can tell by the histogram. But if we go back to exposing to the right, but protecting our highlights, so you can see no clipping here. Maybe I could have even went just a little bit more. So I could have went half an exposure more. And I'm still not clipping. So basically, next time I know out in the field where I went to on my histogram, I can just go a little bit more to get a little bit more out of the shadows, and then still bring these highlights back and increase these shadows. And look at that. We've basically got an image back. So please head out for your assignment and understand how much dynamic range you can get out of your camera. It is probably one of the most important features. In this lesson, we're finally going to look at editing an overall image, but really emphasizing on grad filters. So right now I want to go through and show you a basic overview of editing global and local adjustments. Then on the next lesson, I want to show you how to professionally edit an entire image with hidden secrets, dodge and burning, what to do if you want to print that image or create it for your portfolio, the best possible results you can get. But right now I'm going to go through a quick edit and really emphasize on local adjustments and the power of local adjustments, what they can do to your image just when you think you finally edited your image. In comes local adjustments and takes it to a completely new level. So in your editing software, we want to make sure we've opened up the image of graduated filters. So we're looking at local adjustments right now. But first we have to do global adjustments. You can see on the right hand side, we've exposed perfectly for this image. We've got as much information as we possibly can on the right hand side, and we can always drag it back to protect those highlights. That's the first thing we're going to do, is drag those highlights back to make sure we've got all that information. Now, this is where it comes down to experience and just learning how to edit. This for me here is still too bright. But we don't want to drag down the exposure because this is going to ruin the overall image. This is where local adjustments comes into play. That is why I recommend to go through this editing course and understand me going step by step and editing at the same time, because you're going to see the power of global versus local adjustments. So right now, I'm actually trying to make a flat image, quite an ugly image actually, but it's going to make sense later on. The shadows, right now, if I reduce the shadows, it looks more natural. But what I want to do is actually increase the shadows to get all the information back and then drop the blacks in the image. Okay, so this is where it comes down to practice, practice, practice for editing. And also, once you practice in editing, I 100% guarantee you're going to message me in 1 year's time and you've learnt all your photography out in the field because of your mistakes in editing. So we're just going to introduce that white a little bit, and I'm just going to put the shadows and blacks just down a little bit. So now I've made quite a flat image, quite a boring image, but it's going to start coming to life because this dehaze, we're going to add this dehaze in, and look at that contrast that's being added into the image. Absolutely beautiful. Once again, texture, clarity, vibrance, saturation, and contrast, we're going to leave until everything is fully finished. Highlights just a little bit down. We're going to go through here just very quickly, and darks up, shadows down, so you can see things are starting to come to life now, which is really, really good. As we go down, as I said, we're getting closer and closer to making small, minute adjustments. So the hues here, I think the green's just a little bit too green for my taste. I know it was the middle of summer, it was very beautiful, but still a little bit too green. So small adjustments, see, only -7. The saturation, I'm actually going to take a little bit of saturation out of the green also, but I'm going to add luminance in, because luminance is the light. Not that much, but I just want to show you what it's doing. So now if I toggle this off and on, they are such small adjustments, it's unbelievable. But this is what it comes down to learning your editing software. So we're going to go through right now and just have a look at one more thing and just see if we can get this a little bit more red, but not too much, because we have to remember what is next on the editing, and that is split toning. So highlights are being affected all the way up here. Now I want to stick around this 50 value. As I said, you're going to learn this the more you come into play with all this. So even 35 is going to introduce orange and 8. But remember, this now is going to affect down here for the shadows. So we're going to go to 20, way too much, and try and find a neutral color. So I'm thinking around that 65 again, that green. And rolling that back all the way. I'm actually going to go a little bit more green for this one. So this comes down, I must reiterate, this comes down to personal taste. If you hate this editing, that's fine. It's just understanding what is going on with the editing. Once again, this is too bright up here, but we have to make changes later on. So here we're going to go masking, hold down Alt, still at 40 sharpening, and you're going to see now up the top, the clouds are being sharpened, because remember, white is being sharpened, black is not. So I actually don't want this sharpened with a mask. So I'm actually going to leave this at 0 and drop this down to 0. We're going to touch this later on in our local adjustments because it was sharpening these clouds up here. So I'll just show you once again. Up the top, the clouds are being sharpened. I don't want the clouds to be sharpened. So I'm going to go through and manually sharpen this image. Lens correction I'm going to do, and the overall image is fine because there's no obviously horizon lines, mountains in there. So right now I want to go through, I can actually add my contrast now, 15, and now we're going to jump up here to our local adjustments. I want to start with a graduated filter, drag down whilst holding shift. I need to get rid of that preset that's being made. What I want to do here is we've got too much highlights in here, but not only highlights. So right now this was quite a dark cloud, not a storm cloud, but it was dark. So I want to muck around with my shadows and also the blacks. Look at that. Look at the difference being made to this image just by local adjustments. It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable what you can do with local adjustments. Now, I just want to basically turn this one off and on and show you guys. Unbelievable. Remember, looking at the histogram, it's still exposed. So what I'm trying to explain right now is how I found out what to do. Visually, yes, I know this is too bright, but I can back this up by looking at the histogram here. It's still exposed to the right hand side a little bit. When I make those changes and toggle on, it moves back to the center, and the center is exposure, remember. So I can go through at the top here, and how do I know what number to get? If I go over the whites, yes, I can see right now it's blown out here, but I can see here it's way too bright. But then if I do that, it's missing, so it hasn't got the value. That is how I know what I need to adjust. So even though we're making local adjustments, we still have to remember here, this is what is being adjusted. Now we can go up here to the blacks, click, and I can slide this along. Okay, and it's going to make those changes just by sliding here. But we don't want to do that. We want to keep it small, minute down here. Okay, so with that local change at the top here, it's made the overall global much better. So I'm really happy with this overall, what we've got now. The only other thing I want to look at is we've got a little bit of blue here. So I've actually just reduced that too much now because the histogram just told me. So I'm going to go through and introduce color also. Okay, so 5 and 5. Let's just toggle that off and on. So I'm still missing out on some white values. So right now I just want to add in 10. A little bit too much. Let's go back to 8, 6, 6. Okay, so just reading the histogram, that's all I was doing there. And go back to 3 and 3. So let's just go down, toggle this off and on. Okay, so that is the top done. Let's go done. The bottom here. I don't always have to look at a graduated filter by reducing the highlights. I can go the other way. So top to bottom, as you can see by the preset made, I'm going to go a little bit higher. So around there. There's two reasons I want to do this. So we're going to reset that. The first one is I want to make sure things are sharp here. So I'm just going to go way too much right now. Jump into 100%. And that is way too sharp. So you can see now this is unsharp. This is sharp. Okay. So we're just making those changes directly by this local adjustment. Okay, so before I showed you about the clouds being sharpened, now that's not going to happen. So we can go back to that 40 value, and we are now just sharpening. If I go back to the make it fit in the image and go show selected mask overlay, whatever is red is being sharpened now. So I'm just selectively sharpening those images. I can also go through and make other adjustments also. I can bump the shadows up, I can bump the shadows down, whatever I have to do. We can make color adjustments, we can make local adjustments, we can make numerous things happen in there. So I'm going to bump up the shadows just a little bit and then drop down the black value. So it is simple as that. Now I can go through once again and say I want to make this a little bit darker at the top once again. I can just click back on that graduated filter, click on this node here and go back to the blacks and just reduce it even more. Or I could go back and just push Ctrl Z to where I had and then just go to graduated filter once again and make a small one up here. Reset that value, go back to blacks, and now I'm only affecting that area at the top. So I can go through and make really small adjustments. If I wanted to make small adjustments, I can just click on the adjustment brush and just brush this in here. We're going to get onto that a little bit later on because that is obviously not what we want to do in this situation. So we're going to delete that. Now I just want to go through and show you a simple way of basically A to B split testing. Look, that is the image we had before. It is washed out, there's no color, there's no life into it, and this is after. We can go through now, and if we wanted to, I'm not a big person to add saturation. I'm just going to add a little bit of vibrance into the image and also some clarity, and we are done with that image. Simple as that. From start to finish, global adjustments being made to really heavy local adjustments being made on the top. The one thing I like to do just before I finish this overall image drop that back just a little bit, is go up to 200% and just double check how much noise we've introduced into this image. So I'm just checking now that I haven't introduced noise, over sharpened the image, and there's no unwanted objects in the image or anything basically that stands out at 100 and 200%. So dust spots, anything on the sensor we don't like. So I'm just going to actually go through and add the tiniest bit of noise reduction to luminance and be done with that there. There you have it, left hand side what we started with, right hand side the power of local and global adjustments. Absolutely fantastic. Now on the next lesson we're going to go through and edit the image, quite similar, but I'm going to show you a very professional tip called dodging and burning and how to take your photography to a completely new level.